Sophie Hardy and the Internet Implant by M.R. Dale, narrated by Leona Hall. Chapter 11, A Brief Moment of Calm. By the next morning, parents had discussed what they thought should happen via various chat rooms and other social media and agreed that their children would be better off carrying on as normal. Katie's mum had said Katie had spent all afternoon talking with Mr. Houghton as she couldn't get off work and go and fetch her. Letting them stay at home all day to watch TV would just scare them, and, if another blackout was to occur, the children would probably be much safer at school than at home or wandering the streets. As a result, Sophie and Yasmin, who had stayed over at Sophie's that night, walked to school the day after. Yasmin started straightening Sophie's spare school jumper that she'd borrowed. "I've been thinking," she said. "Were you sitting down at the time? You know it's dangerous when you do that standing up," Sophie asked with jovial undertones. Yasmin simply tilted her head in acknowledgement of the mickey taking and carried on talking. "If you get called singularity because of the incident the day before yesterday—" Was it only that long ago? Sophie thought to herself. So much had happened in less than 48 hours. "Then I should get a nickname as well. We're about to do all this spying and crime fighting together, and I was the first child to get an implant. I'm probably more important than you." Yasmin meant no harm by this. It may have sounded rude, but Sophie knew her friend well enough to know she didn't mean it like that. "OK, what were you thinking?" Sophie asked cautiously. At this point, Sophie noticed some people on the other side of the street, whispering and pointing in their direction. Fame was clearly beginning to set in for her and Yasmin. The pair waved and carried on walking. Yasmin reached round and unzipped her bag. Out of it, she took Tom's thesaurus that lived on his bookshelf. Sophie asked her mum once why he still needed one, when nowadays all books were read online. She told her that Dad always said it was good to have books in the house because they couldn't be tampered with or changed like things online could be. "What are you doing with that?" Sophie asked, perplexed that Yasmin would feel so comfortable in Sophie's house that she'd just take something without asking. "It's helping me find a better word for first. As I was the first child with an implant, my name should reflect that," Yasmin replied, completely oblivious to Sophie's perplexity. "Oh, well, in that case," Sophie began, but was cut off before she could finish. "Here we are. Foremost. No. Principal? No. Paramount. Best so far. Uppermost. Go with paramount. No. Here it is. Singularity. I'd like you to meet your new partner, Prime." Yasmin was stood with her hands on her hips doing her best superhero pose, which looked kind of silly in a lilac school uniform. Sophie smiled at her friend. "OK, Prime, I accept. Together we shall investigate a huge company that are responsible for the mass fainting of billions of people around the world and prove that they're lying, even though we're only 10 years old." "How exactly are we going to do that?" Yasmin asked. "What do we do first?" "We're going to talk to Mr. Houghton about the competition and see how exactly we won and what we had to do. Why we haven't heard which other schools entered, why it was so important that he moved his own son here. We have a lot of questions to ask." Sophie had written this plan down and a host of questions on a piece of paper. "Why didn't you use an online thesaurus just then?" Sophie asked, realising that her best friend had missed an opportunity to use her new implant. "And missed talking to you? This is much better. Spies don't communicate through the internet. That would leave a trail that any government hacks could follow." Yasmin really had learnt all the spy lingo. Sophie smiled at her best friend as she seemed to be enjoying all this despite everyone all over the world fainting. "Ooh, this is so electrifying, adrenaline-charged and exhilarating." Yasmin was nearly bursting. "Put my dad's thesaurus away," Sophie tutted, and smiled, then rubbed her eye again. The flashing was really annoying her now. She thought it might have disappeared after a night's sleep, but apparently not. This was it. They were going for it. Unbeknown to them, about 50 paces behind them down the road, Katie was walking to school by herself, with shoulders hunched and hood up. Sophie's original plan was to arrive at school early and go straight to Mr. Houghton's office. This didn't work, though, because he hadn't arrived yet, and Mrs. Tabard, who was running breakfast club that morning, said he'd dropped Reuben off there and would be for the next few days while he got some stuff sorted, and said that he would be in slightly later as he had an important meeting, nothing unusual for a head teacher. Sophie and Yasmin stood around on the playground waiting for the whistle to go so that they could line up. There were no reporters there at all this morning. They had all got bigger stories to write about, the potential new mythicals coming to invade Earth by making everyone faint. Nobody was particularly bothered about a 10-year-old girl anymore, apart from some of the younger girls in year 2 and 3 who seemed to be looking up to Sophie and copying some of the things she did, like the way she stood, or they now had the same bag or coat as her. While they were waiting, Katie came up to Sophie and Yasmin. "Hey," she muttered quietly. "Hello, what happened to you yesterday?" Sophie asked. "I was stuck at school until my mum could get off work," Katie replied. "Mr. Houghton was telling me something interesting about—" Katie paused. "It wouldn't matter to you." Katie desperately wanted her 2 friends to ask her to finish a story, but neither of them seemed to be listening, so she changed topic. "What have you been up to?" Katie asked. "Oh, we just came up with a plan to—" Yasmin was also partway through her sentence before Sophie cut her off. "Stop!" Sophie shouted, then realised she had shouted and looked round to see who was listening. There were some children from lower down the school looking in her direction, but Sophie assumed that they were still interested in the singularity, as they were too young to understand the blackout. Katie looked baffled. She still wanted the 2 of them to ask her about yesterday, but they weren't bothered or hadn't noticed. As a result, she gestured for Sophie to offer an explanation as to why she had shouted so loudly. "We're really sorry, but we can't tell you," Sophie said apologetically. "Fine," said Katie. "Not like we tell each other stuff anymore anyway." Yasmin stepped in to try and offer an explanation and to calm her friend down. "It's just been a busy 2 days. "Yes, but you could let me know what's happening, couldn't you?" Katie'd never raised her voice. This was the angriest Sophie and Yasmin had ever seen her. "We will tell you everything when we get chance," Sophie explained. "Whatever," Katie said, and she stormed off to a different part of the playground. Before she was out of earshot, Yasmin asked, "What's her problem?" "We've got quite a lot going on, and there's a lot she doesn't know," Sophie began. "We're supposed to be best friends. We need to tell her things, or she'll stop talking to us." Before Yasmin could reply, the whistle went and everyone joined their class lines. Miss Sissons came out with a bit more of a smile on her face than yesterday and led the class in. The Sophie Hardy saga was written and produced by Emma Dale and narrated and produced by Leona Hall. If you enjoyed it and would like to continue to follow the adventures of Sophie and her friends in coming episodes, then please subscribe through one of the many podcast providers out there. The links for each of these can be found on our website. If you require more information, visit our many social media channels, or if you would like to purchase a hard copy of the book, then be sure to check out www.sophiehardysaga.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy.